U.S. President Joe Biden says he will not support an Israeli attack on sites related to Tehran's nuclear program when asked about Israel's possible response to Iran's missile attack on Tuesday. Biden's comments came after he and fellow G7 leaders, including foreign ministers from France, Germany, Italy, and the UK, spoke by phone on Wednesday to discuss coordinating new sanctions against Iran.
The answer is no. I think there's things. We'll be discussing with the Israelis what they're going to do, but all 7 of us agree that they have a right to respond, but they should respond in proportion.
Meanwhile, U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller addressed Israel's move in barring the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres from entering the country, calling the move unproductive. Members of the UN Security Council held an emergency meeting on Wednesday to discuss Iran's attack on Israel. Israel's ambassador to the UN said that Guterres' latest statement calling for de-escalation in the Middle East conflict is detached from reality. The Secretary General condemned Iran's attack during the meeting, but at the same time urged Israel not to hinder ceasefire efforts in both Lebanon and Gaza.
At least 6 people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike on central Beirut in the early hours of Thursday. Lebanese authorities said the airstrike started a fire in an apartment building in the residential Bashura district, not far from the United Nations headquarters. Residents in Beirut reported a sulfur-like smell in the city following the airstrike. Lebanon's state-run national news agency later accused Israel of using international banned phosphorus bombs. The attack was the second airstrike on central Beirut this week. Multiple strikes were also reported in Beirut's southern Dahieh suburbs. The Israeli Defense Force, IDF, issued evacuation orders for 5 buildings, but the area struck in central Beirut was not covered in those warnings. Throughout Wednesday, Israel's military engaged in close-range encounters with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. The IDF released footage it said showed Israeli troops on the ground there. Meanwhile, about 8 IDF soldiers have died in combat since Israel began a ground invasion of southern Lebanon this week. According to the IDF, more than 240 rockets were fired from southern Lebanon towards northern Israel throughout Wednesday.
The UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that the relations between the UK and the European Union would be strengthened at pace during a meeting in Brussels. The Labour politician, however, refused to elaborate further on the exact shape relations between the UK and the EU would take.
We should explore the scope for more cooperation while we focus on the full and faithful implementation of the withdrawal agreement, the Windsor Framework and the TCA.
The pair face a long game of negotiations ahead. Starmer wants to smooth out trade barriers between the two partners, with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen refusing to say how the UK could negotiate this without re-entering the single market.
Good afternoon. On youth mobility, look, again, I have made it clear what our position is, and in particular that free movement is a red line.
Despite the red lines, the two sides agreed to discuss relations in an atmosphere of warmth.
Most people don't care about Brexit. It's not a priority issue for UK voters. It's maybe 5–10% of the population that considers EU relations a priority issue. But this is potentially an advantage for the UK government if it wants to get closer, because people aren't really paying attention.
Both leaders have agreed to hold regular meetings to check on progress, with the first summit to take place in the first half of 2025. The victims of the 2023 train accident in Greece have expressed their strong disagreement with the candidacy of the Greek Apostolos Gigikostas as Commissioner for Transport. In February 2023, 57 people, mainly university students, were killed in a train crash in Tempe. Since then, victims' relatives have claimed that the government is trying to cover up the case, which is now being investigated by the judiciary. The Tempe 2023 Association sent a letter to the President of the European Commission.
Αυτό που θέλουμε να τονίσουμε είναι ότι τα συγκεκριμένα χαρτοφυλάκια, τα οποία θα δίνονται σε Έλληνες, οι οποίοι ανήκουν και στο κυβερνών κόμμα, για μια υπόθεση η οποία είναι εν εξελίξη και αφορά την κυβέρνηση, είναι τελείως άτοπο. Δεν καταλαβαίνουμε την λογική του και θεωρούμε ότι υπάρχει και σύγκρουση συμφερόντων.
Maria Caristiano was in Brussels to denounce also the choice of MEP Elisa Vozenberg as chair of the Transport Committee of the European Parliament.
And friends,
she says these nominations are aimed at avoiding accountability for the rail tragedy. Speaking to Euronews, Vozenberg has denied the allegations.
Αλλά λίμωνο να αφήνουμε εχμές, ότι, γιατί αυτά γράφτηκαν και υπόθηκαν, ότι είτε εγώ είτε ο κύριος Τζιτζικώστας, εφόσον και εκείνος εγκριθεί μετά τις ακροάσεις, θα συνδράμουμε, προσέξτε, την κυβέρνηση σε ένα κουκούλωμα ή σε μια συσκότηση των στοιχείων που πρέπει να βγουν στη δημοσιότητα.
On the 4th of November, the European Parliament will start the hearings of the designated commissioners to approve them for the job or reject them.
Swine fever has gripped northern Italian regions, threatening livelihoods and production of prized pork products. The areas of greatest concern include Piedmont, Emilia-Romagna and Lombardy, regions known for their Parma prosciutto. Damage to the pork industry is estimated at €500 million so far, with farmers at risk of losing their livelihoods.
E dalle analisi fatte abbiamo purtroppo scoperto il virus della peste nel nostro allevamento. Sono immediatamente scattate tutte le procedure che la normativa prevede, con l'abbattimento di tutti i capi presenti in allevamento, quelli malati e purtroppo anche quelli sani.
As soon as the swine fever was confirmed in Italy, 12 countries, including China, Taiwan and Mexico, put an immediate ban on importing Italian pork, regardless of whether it was produced in an area where swine fever was detected or not.
Activists and experts at Baku's climate summit are warning that extreme weather is threatening the world's food supply ahead of the COP29 UN summit in November. Speakers at the Baku Climate Action Week in the run-up to the city hosting the summit emphasized the importance of ports as a lifeline. Hurricanes and rising sea levels are disrupting the ability of ports to operate, stopping the flow of goods from food to medical supplies, putting pressure and harming countries' GDP. A non-profit organization focused on ports says it's publishing a report for COP29 to show how some ports are dealing with climate change.
There are 17,000 ports around the world and 30 million individuals work directly within them. So it's not just imports and exports, and people's livelihoods are dependent on ports.
The countdown to COP29 is on in Azerbaijan. The country says one of its focuses will be on water. It wants communities to come together and create knowledge hubs, sharing information that will lead to policies that will protect water basins. Another topic discussed at the summit was how technology could mitigate the impacts of climate change. What kind of action can they take?
So this is action, establishment of the knowledge hub, cooperation in that knowledge hub, discussing the way the policies that would take into account the interests of all countries sharing the basins, creating data, creating information on that water basin.
An agricultural NGO that is on the COP29 advisory board said it understood there were questions about whether the annual summits would lead to real improvements for the environment.
So what I would want to say is that progress can be slow, but progress does happen in these COPs. So we have to be patient, but at the same time, we have to agitate for faster change.
Rui de Carvalho's life is on stage. That's how he sees it. That's how he wants it to continue. At 97.5 years old, he is the oldest theatre actor in the world still working. 4 days a week, he fulfills the ritual of arriving here at the Malaposta Theatre on the outskirts of Lisbon. and donning the skin of Major Metcalf in Agatha Christie's play The Mousetrap.
Eu sou ator há 83 anos e tenho 97 anos e 6 meses. Como vê, já tenho quase 98 anos e represento ainda. Portanto, acho que não há muitos no mundo a fazer o que eu estou a fazer. Que eu faço com muito agrado e que gosto muito de fazer o meu trabalho. Acho que não devo desistir enquanto eu tiver possibilidade de continuar a trabalhar. Eu trabalho porque sinto que tenho memória, que sou capaz de decorar ainda um texto. Peço para não serem coisas muito grandes, para eu ter muita dificuldade e não perder muitas horas a estudar, porque eu estudo. Eu estudo em casa. Não? Os improvisos levam muito tempo a trabalhar.
For the actors who work with him, it leaves a mark in their lives.
Para nós é uma honra e uma aprendizagem constante, porque o Rui é um exemplo a seguir. Todos nós queremos ser um dia o Rui de Carvalho, não só pelo talento, mas pela longevidade, por esta capacidade de estar sempre disponível, sempre a aprender, apesar da idade, sempre atento a tudo. É muito curioso perceber que o Rui continua a viver o palco como se fosse a primeira vez.
Como é que é trabalhar com o Rui de Carvalho? É um orgulho imenso. Todos os dias aprendemos alguma coisa e é maravilhoso vê-lo a trabalhar com esta energia, com esta alegria, pisar o palco todos os dias. Portanto, é uma maravilha trabalhar com o Rui.
Quando a ratoeira da Agatha Christie estreou em Londres há 72 anos, Rui de Carvalho já era profissional de teatro há 5 anos. Com a energia com que o vimos neste palco esta noite, certamente a peça vai poder ficar em cena aqui em Lisboa durante muito tempo também. Com a imagem de Bruno Silva, Ricardo Figueira, Euronews, Lisboa.